joined in the studio this morning by the head honcho, the chief exec of Virgin Trains. He's a Black Country man born and bred. In fact, he is Branson's right-hand man, I would have thought, with the Virgin Train operations. Tony Collins from Sedgley, worked at various manufacturing companies in the West Midlands, Yale Forklift Trucks, Cannon Cookers in Coseley, and Transport Engineering. Alstom, before being poached by Virgin, where he's been for the past 14 years. Tony, good morning.
Good morning.
And let's go to Dan. He's on line one. Welcome, Dan.
Hi, Dan. Are you all right?
Yeah, Tony's all yours.
Hi, Tony.
Oh, yeah.
Hi. All it is, just two questions, really. The first one, it's May the 18th, there was a headline in the Express and Star, and it said, HS2 will slash train services in Black Country and staffs, warns boss. And I read the whole article and I couldn't quite read where you'd said that it would slash services in the Black Country and staffs. And then that story kind of got picked up about 10 days later by the Telegraph. And so this is so the first bit of the question is, what's your thoughts on Black Country and staff services with regard to HS2? And then the follow-up to it was picked up in the Telegraph, and there it was making remarks that the classic line HS2 trains wouldn't be able to run as fast as Pendolinos, and that puzzled me because I thought those trains haven't been designed or procured yet. So it's really two questions, because I think you only see a bit of the story when you read in the newspaper what somebody said, and I just wondered what your thoughts were on those 2 points.
The first question was the slashing of services within the Black Country, Stafford and Wolverhampton. I think the point there is a vast majority of the revenue that will go on High Speed 2 will be abstracted off the current lines. For example, with our services, we turn over around £1 billion a year. Probably 40% of that revenue would go to High Speed 2. So then it starts to question the economics of what's left. So you could see a situation where what we are currently a profitable franchise that pays a big premium to government, High Speed 2 may turn that into a loss-making franchise. So therefore, you start then look at the services you operate. So there is a risk that the revenue that goes across to High Speed 2, you then start to question the viability of the services that are left, and that might affect the level of services. That was the first point. In terms of the trains that are going on High Speed 2, the plan at the moment is to buy, and I have to use old money here, miles an hour rather than kilometres, they're buying 225 mile an hour non-tilting trains. To run at 125 miles an hour on the West Coast, you have to tilt. If you can't tilt, as our Pendolinos can tilt, you can only go 100 miles an hour. So consequently, that high-speed train will whiz up to Birmingham at 230 miles an hour, and then when it comes off the high-speed line onto the current infrastructure, it can only go 100 miles an hour. So it goes more slowly than a Pendolino. And that's the reason at the moment. What we're pushing is saying, why don't you have tilting trains on High Speed 2 as well? We could go and procure a 180 mile an hour tilting train. The speed difference between 180 miles an hour and 225, sorry, it's getting a bit technical, between Birmingham and London is just 6 minutes. But you have all the advantages of being able to go 125 when you go north of Birmingham to places like Scotland.
Well, I suppose the response to that, I guess, is that if we're looking at rail passengers are increasing, we're getting more and more passengers, then actually HS2 is about capacity between the West Midlands and London, and then a link through, if the HS2, HS1 link goes in, then it connects us up to the high-speed network in Europe. So I'm just thinking from Wolverhampton point of view, if more people in Birmingham are hopping on the HS2 line, the growth anyway, I would suggest on the West Coast, is that we could still see growth in numbers. So the existing West Coast on the classic line, I mean, I suppose Tony's going to know way more than me about this, but I would have thought that there'd be a business case there that you're still going to have people travelling on the classic line. We're seeing massive growth. You've just said yourself, Danny, when we ride on Pendos in and out of London, they're stood and standing. It's really, really crowded. So it feels to me like HS2, if you live in the West Midlands and you're not for it, it feels like we're looking a gift horse in the mouth, because they're building us an extra railway line between London and the West Midlands and then linking us up to the north and to Europe. So I think in terms of growth, I'd be less concerned about that. But as I say, Tony's going to know more about that than me.
I would agree with you, and I think that's the point we're trying to make as Virgin Trains, is you have to integrate High Speed 2 into the current network properly. So you should not have trains that can go 230 miles an hour coming down to 100 miles an hour when they get onto the West Coast Main Line. You should have the ability for Wolverhampton trains, for example, to be able to use the high-speed line. And that's the point we're making. If you integrate it properly into the current network, including East Coast as well, you will get that growth. and you will get the service improvement between places like Wolverhampton, Stafford, and so forth. At the moment, the strategy is effectively to have very much a dedicated line called High Speed 2, which we think is wrong.
A lot of people, Tony, want to know why they pay for a ticket and they have to stand up from London and they're like sardines. And we're going to talk about, it must be the most common complaint besides the punctuality of the trains. How do you believe we stack up our rail network to, say, our international friends on the continent?
I think we stack up really well. I think, unfortunately, that the trait of the British is let's knock ourselves. We have and have had for the last 15 to 20 years the fastest growing rail patronage in Europe. We have European railways come to say, how do you grow your railway so much? And a consequence of the growth is we are getting more crowded trains. It's not just Virgin trains, it's across the whole network. Is we are carrying significantly more passengers than we were before privatisation. We're using every piece of track we possibly can and every piece of rolling stock. And consequently, we're in a situation where we do get crowded trains more often than we would like. And we need that extra capacity to put more trains in, put more track down and so forth.
More carriages would be this simple answer, wouldn't it?
And that's what we did last year. We lengthened the Pendolinos, most of the Pendolinos, from 9 car to 11 car. But then we start to get into the limits of the infrastructure. There's not that many platforms that can take any more than 11 cars. You then get to the point where your train's hanging over the points. So you stop other trains operating. And that's the thing about back to High Speed 2 is if we're going to spend that sort of money, let's integrate it into the current network so we can get 12 car, 13 car Pendolinos in at Wolverhampton Station, for example, and so forth. So I think we're faced by insurmountable opportunities with the rail system. If we get the investment coming in the right form and look at it as an integrated strategy over the next 30 years, I think High Speed 2 has become a vanity project in many ways. It's everybody's getting excited about end-to-end journey times. Running a rail, most of our passengers, we carry 30 plus million people a year on Virgin trains. Most of those are short distance, not end-to-end journeys between London and Wolverhampton or Glasgow and Wolverhampton. So we have to think of this much differently in terms of getting that integration into the system where we can carry the passengers. One thing's for sure, we will have more demand over the next 10, 15, 20 years.
It's going to get worse, though. Unless we extend the platforms, it's going to get worse because you can only put on, say, 11 carriages or cars, as you just suggested. And I take on board what you say about short journeys. But if more and more people are going to use our trains and we're limited to how many carriages we can run, we're talking Virgin here, then more and more people are going to face having to stand up more and more frequently. Do you think that's acceptable?
No, I don't. And I think if you look at we took over Virgin Trains, or Virgin Trains started where we were carrying about 12 million people a year. In 15 years, we've taken that to 33, 34 million. So the demand's there. But there's lots we can do. We can put things like in-cab signalling into the trains where we can run the trains much closer together. At the moment, we run them 3 minutes apart. And we have this thing called fixed block signalling, which uses a lot of capacity. If we put in-cab signalling, we can run the trains closer together and therefore run more of them. We can put selective infrastructure upgrades, like 4-tracking parts of the Coventry corridor, so we can get past the slower commuter trains. So there's lots of things we can do to increase capacity. That's why we really need the franchising process to encourage that sort of investment.
OK, let's go to Padraig O'Diddley, who writes down, if or when HS2 is built, Wolverhampton to Euston, you'll be better off staying on a direct train than at New Street, Curzon Street or Euston. Does that make sense?
I think what he's saying is you'd have to get off the train to get on the high-speed train at Curzon Street. So that takes time. That could put another 10 or 15. So what he's saying is you get on at Wolverhampton, just stay on it. Now, what I would argue, if you integrate it properly, why doesn't the Wolverhampton train go to Stafford and reverse down the Trent Valley and pick the high-speed line up so you get the benefit high speed? And then what you can do then is slot more local services with the space the Pendolino is taken away.
Well, what's the answer to this? Because it sounds common sense, but it's not a goer.
I think, and I think what you have is this team is looking at High Speed 2. He's looking at it as in complete isolation. It'd be like High Speed 1, an underused piece of railway. And it is common sense, and virtually all the industry is saying exactly the same thing, but unfortunately, for some reason, the messages aren't getting through to government.